Thank you. So welcome. We are really glad that you're able to join us today for this informational session about radon testing. Today, I'm joined by Marc Katz from the Indoor Air Unit at the Minnesota Department of Health, as well as American Sign Language interpreters. My name is Heather Nelson, and I am a professor at the University of Minnesota, and I study the causes of cancer. I am also one of the lead investigators for the 10,000 Family Study. You can learn more about the 10,000 families on our website, which is the number 10kfs.umn.edu, or on our social media channels. The National Cancer Institute has awarded the 10,000 Family Study a grant funding to collect information on specific environmental exposures in Minnesota. The success of this work is really dependent on Minnesotans like yourself who have stepped up to provide their time and information. Many of you are participants in the study, and on behalf of the study team, I'd like to thank you for your generosity. Your participation is really important for helping us understand not only whether some environmental exposures cause cancer, but how they cause cancer. And for those of you who aren't participants in the study, I would invite you to join. Participation involves the following steps. Yourself and at least one family member will fill out an eligibility survey at our website, 10kfs.umn.edu. You would provide a questionnaire, which takes about 30 to 45 minutes to do, and a radon test, and attend a health visit where we would get some basic measurements and a blood sample. Then every 2 years, we'll send you a really brief follow-up survey to let us know how you're doing. So an important part of this study is returning information back to study participants and providing education around environmental exposures. And that's why we're here today. Our objective is to discuss radon, which is one of the exposures we are focused on in the 10,000 Families study. Today's education presentation will last for approximately 35 minutes, and following the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. As you think of questions during the webinar, please type them in the Q&A box, and after the presentation, we'll go through the questions together. Your questions can be specific to your own radon result, or they can be more general questions. In addition, if you have questions about the 10,000 Family Study, you can ask them here, visit our website, or send us an email. We will be recording the presentation part of today's event so that it might be shared on the study website for those who were unable to attend. Now I'd like to introduce our radon expert for today's session. Marc Katz comes to us from the Indoor Air Unit at the Minnesota Department of Health. He is responsible for planning radon outreach and education activities and has enthusiastically agreed to join us today. Marc is from New Jersey and received his master's in public health and epidemiology and health education from Rutgers University. Before joining the health department here in Minnesota, Marc was the Cancer Coalition Coordinator for the Hunterdon County Health Department in New Jersey and an evaluation coordinator at the University of Minnesota. We're really grateful that he is here today to share his expertise and answer your specific questions. He tells us one of his outside work interests is searching for the best New York-style pizza in Minnesota. So if you have recommendations on that, please share them too. And with that, I will turn things over to Marc.
Hi, everyone. Let me go ahead and share my presentation screen. Okay. Can someone give me, Clement or Heather, give me a verbal okay that you see the presentation?
I do not, but maybe Clement, can you?
No, it's not up yet.
Okay, let me share it again.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. So it's funny, my supervisor at the, I'm with the Minnesota Department of Health in the Indoor Air Unit, and really thank the U of M's 10,000 Family Study for having us today. And so I want to talk a little bit about radon. And it's kind of funny, I talked to my boss about the best pizza, and there are a couple recommendations. But if you want a good slice of pizza, I think the best thing to do is head to New Jersey. So let's talk about radon. That's me in the Indoor Air Unit. We do a lot of different things. We work on carbon monoxide and mold. We do regulation and we do outreach. But for me, my major role at the Indoor Air Unit is radon. And I do a lot of community outreach and education like I'm doing today. And so I'm glad to be here. So about radon. Radon is a colorless and odorless gas. It's a natural gas. You don't really know it's there, but it is radioactive. And the gas itself comes from the soil, and every soil has radon in it. It's very common. And it comes from the breakdown of uranium. And it's the leading cause of lung cancer for non-smokers, and the second leading cause of cancer for smokers. Now, soil, as I said, is the major source. Sometimes people also think about water as a source and in air, and indeed soil gets into the air. And when radon gets into the air, it's not a problem outside, but there we go. The radon can concentrate in the home. And when it concentrates in the home, it does tend to become a problem. And water itself is not a problem in Minnesota, but the soil getting into the air is what we want to concentrate on. So radon, there's no safe level. The World Health Organization recommends 2.7. And it was basically in 2009, the World Health Organization came out with this recommendation based on a lot of science and studies that were done in the early 2000s. The EPA had come up in the early 1990s with a different standard of 4.0. At the time, it was the amount of radon that could be reduced by radon mitigators. And that's it. So it wasn't a health-based standard. And what we know today is that we want to try to get it as low as possible, but 4 is the action level. So we should definitely try to get it below 4. In Minnesota, the average level is 4.2. So the action level being 4 is lower than the Minnesota average. Indeed, Minnesota is one of the states that has the highest amounts of radon in it, in the state, in the country. And the EPA, while they put the official action level at 4.0, anywhere between 2 to 3.9, we say to consider mitigation. It depends on a lot of different factors. For instance, if your children have a bedroom in the basement and you measure it at 3.0, then I would definitely get a radon mitigation system. If, for instance, you exercise, and like me, I have an artist studio in the basement, and my level was 3.5, well, then I definitely would get a mitigation system. So it just depends. If you're never in the basement and it's 4.0, well, you might consider it and test on the first floor. So nothing is as black and white, I guess, as we would like it to be. Now, Minnesota's radon levels are more than 3 times higher than the rest of the United States. If you're wondering about other states that have high radon, Pennsylvania, South Dakota, and Iowa are very high states. They have very high radon levels. There has been radon, I think, I know, over 1,000 picocuries per liter tested near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And if you think the actual level is 4, 1,000 is very, very high. So this is part of our social media campaign that we do each year. And we like to just point out that 2 out of 5 Minnesota homes have high radon. So 2 out of 5, it's quite a lot of homes. It's 40% of the homes. And what we want to do is we want to make sure everyone tests, because you don't know if your home is going to have high radon or not. As I mentioned before, radon is the leading cause of lung cancer for non-smokers, the second leading cause of lung cancer overall. The EPA did some studies and showed that an estimated 21,000 deaths annually are due to radon exposure. In Minnesota, that's about 600 deaths a year. When I was looking at today on the EPA website, they mentioned that about, and I don't know how they do this, but the math is beyond me, that they do about, they calculated about 14% of lung cancer cases are due to radon exposure. Now, you might ask, how do I get radon in the home? And, all homes act differently, which is why you need to test your own home. But basically, air pressure drives radon into the home. Now, a home wants to be under what is like equilibrium or equal pressure, which means if air leaves, it needs to get air from somewhere to be under equal pressure again. And there's really three ways this happens. Number one is the stack effect. The warm air is going to rise as you heat the home, especially during winter. And that air leaves through the top of the home. Some of that new air is going to come from doors, windows, but some of it comes from the soil, which contains the radon in it. So radon is going to move into the house because of the stack effect. The other thing is during a storm, like when wind gets really windy, it's going to push air out of the home. So again, that air needs to be replaced, and some of it comes from the soil, and that soil has radon. The last part with air pressure is a vacuum effect. Think of like dryers. When you use a dryer, what happens? That air leaves the home, right? That hot air is going to be pushed out of the home along with lint and other things. As well as like take a shower. You take a shower, or you have a vent hood on your stove, that air is going to leave the home. So mechanically exhausted air leaves the home and is replaced from other pathways. So those pathways might mean fresh air from a door or from a window or from the soil. So those are three ways, the main ways that radon will enter the home. Now, so the other way was like, how does it enter the home in terms of air pressure? But then how does it get in? And they're called pathways. And some major pathways are whenever the soil touches the foundation of the home. It might mean like a crawl space or a crack in the foundation of the home. It could mean the sump pump, which is connected to the soil and goes into the basement. Or it might mean just as simple as a mortar joint or on top of black cement walls. There's a lot of pathways that radon, being a gas, can enter into the home. And if you're curious about like where this data is, so we have all this data on our website. You can just Google mn.gov/radon. And there you can find a link to our maps. So right now we have 10 years of data and we have a lot of tests. And this is where we get all of the information from. When people do tests, they send it to over 11 labs that are used in Minnesota. At the end of the year, labs give us all of their data and it's collected and put on this map. In about another month or so, we'll be updating these maps. And we have from the years 2021 to 2023, 71,000 tests that have already been cleaned. We had over 200,000 tests, but some of them are apartments, some of them are buildings, some of them are errors. So we have about 70,000 new tests. So it'll be good to see what these maps are updated with, and I might get some new numbers. So this is the radon map right here. And you'll see in the southwest corner. So you'll see that in the southwest corner of Minnesota, that the radon levels are a bit higher. And that's because the uranium content in the southern part of Minnesota is higher. And if you go to the northeast corner of Minnesota, it's a bit lower. But really the big message here is even at the northeast corner of Minnesota, the radon levels, you don't know, they're still 16 to 35%. You don't know if the 16 to 35% of the homes that have high radon in northeast Minnesota which home it is that needs to be tested. So you just need to test. Because you could live in that area and you're still 35% likely to have a home with high radon. If we look at the top 3 counties of Minnesota, the top 3 counties that have high radon are Murray County, which 80% of the homes have high radon, and Rock County, 79%, and then Renville, 74% of the homes have high radon. So it's especially high down there, and more likely than not, your home will have high radon. It doesn't mean these counties are the only counties that you should test your home. Every county should be tested, but this isn't especially important to test would be this area. So my message to everyone here, if it were to be an elevator speech, would be that you can be a superhero for your family and for yourself. And go out there, go to our website, or go to mn.radon.com. And you could buy a radon test kit and test your home. And that way you'll know. So just know those radon levels. It's important to understand what they are. And your kids will think you're pretty cool. Maybe not that cool. It is a radon test after all, but you have to sell it. So this is also kind of an important thing. And I just wanted to talk about the lifetime risk of lung cancer, because lung cancer is it's radon causes lung cancer. That's the big thing. And based on data from the EPA, there's no way to guess or predict a home's radon level because, there's no way to guess, and you can't rely on a neighbor's test. But the EPA did come out with some data, and they basically showed that radon risks can be very high for lung cancer, quite high. If the Minnesota average being 4.0, 4.2, if you were exposed to that over a lifetime and you were still a non-smoker, if you breathe 4 picocuries per liter over a lifetime, that you have a 7 in 1,000 lifetime risk of dying from lung cancer. If you're a smoker, your risk goes up substantially to 62 in 1,000. So it's quite high. It's so everyone should test, but if you're a smoker or if you were a past smoker, your risk does go up quite a bit if you are exposed to the average level of radon. So it's important if you smoke to definitely test your home. So there are 2 ways to test. There's a short-term test and there's a long-term test. The short-term test is over a short period of time. It's just 2 to 7 days. You put it up, you get a result, and you're done. You always want to start with the short-term test because you want to know pretty quickly if your home is high radon. If the home has 100 picocuries per liter or even 20 or 10, you don't want to wait another year to mitigate. You want to get that done pretty quickly. A long-term test, on the other hand, is over a full year, and it takes into account seasonal averages. And so there are seasonal averages in radon levels. During the winter, we've shown that it's about a picocurie, 1 picocurie per liter more. During the summer, it's a little bit less. And what we would suggest for everyone is start with the short term. And then you could do another test, one more test, a short term or a long term. And so you have 2 tests. And then from there, you can decide if you need to mitigate with the action level being 4 or greater. The long-term test is measured over pretty much a full year. You want to keep it up for the winter season and the pretty much the winter and a couple other seasons, 2 or 3 other seasons, to get a year average of what that radon level you're being exposed to. So the charcoal test is a short-term test. That's the most common test. And it's basically charcoal, and it absorbs the radon in the air. And then you just send it in, and the lab analyzes it. They email you with the result. It would take about 3 to 7 days to put up, and then another week to get the result back. So 2 weeks in total, and then you'll have a result. We sell these through a contract through AirCheck. You can go on our website. Again, it's mn.gov/radon. And you can look to buy a test kit there for about $13. There is a continuous radon monitor too. That's used in real estate transactions. You would hire a licensed measurement provider if you were to sell your home and they put that up for 2 days. And that measures basically the radon level hour to hour, but it also looks at if someone moves the monitor or opens a window, the relative humidity would change. And they'd let the client know that. So generally buyers would ask for someone professional to test the home during a real estate transaction because of that trust. So this is a long-term test. This is called an alpha track. And radon causes damage to the lungs through alpha particles, or these type of radiation particles. And what the alpha track does is actually is a piece of plastic on there. And the alpha particles create dent marks or pot marks on the plastic. And when you send it to the lab, they open it up and count those pot marks divided by the number of days you have it up, and they get a test result. So it just goes to show that if the alpha is causing damage to the plastic, that can also cause damage to your lung tissue. And it's through breathing it in, and then it damages the lung that way. So the short-term radon test kit is the most common test kit in Minnesota. Most people use this. And there are some ways you want to hang it up correctly. So it gives you an accurate and reliable result. And one of the things you want to make sure to do is put it at your breathing level or where your mouth is. And so you put a test kit at where you're breathing and that radon level. And the other thing you want to do is you want to keep it away from walls, exterior walls and exterior windows. Because even though you don't notice it, the air pressure around exterior walls and windows will change how radon is absorbed through the test kit. And then you want to just go ahead and keep it away from like heat sources, like a radiator or an oven for that matter. And then not put it in the kitchen or somewhere like a bathroom that would have moisture, because then the charcoal kit would collect that moisture. You'd want to put it in an area that you're regularly in the lowest level. So a basement would be great. If you're not regularly in the basement, like an hour or two a day, then put it on the first floor. And then an area that you're in, it might be a bedroom, it might be a living room, something like that. Okay, so this is about the test results now. So once you send it to the lab, you're going to get back some results, and you're going to want to understand what those results mean. So the first one is always a short-term test. And the results of the first test determine what you do for the second test. So if it's 0 to 1.9 for the first test, you don't need to do anything. You're good. Retest every 5 years. If it's 2 to 7.9, well, it's high, but it's not so high that it's immediately concerning. So we would say follow up with a long-term test. So you have a short-term test, and then you do a long-term test. If it's 8 or greater for the first test, it's actually quite high and a bit concerning. We don't want you to wait a year before you mitigate. So test one more time to be sure, average the 2 tests together, and see what that result is. We say if it's 4 or greater, mitigate. If it's between 2 to 4, consider mitigating the radon. But really the thing is that it's not black and white. So I'll give you some instances like I did before. My basement measured at 3.6. And I have a rowing machine down there and an art studio down there. So I am going to mitigate. If it measured, for instance, 3.6, it's still high enough that I might mitigate even if I'm not down there. But maybe my second test, I'd be like, well, maybe I'll do it on the first floor because I don't really use the basement at all. And then you can see what that test result is for the first floor. So it's kind of like you try to do the best you can, but there isn't like black and white about when to mitigate and when not. It's kind of up to you. Sometimes if you have children, then you definitely want to mitigate maybe if it's even like 3 or higher. If, it's, most of the time though, it's just something that you can call us if you have any questions on, and we can help interpret those results for you too. So with the second test, if it's a long-term test for the second test, just use that result by itself and then see what that says. If you had a short-term test, then you did another short-term test, then you average the two, and then you get a number that way, and then you determine what to do, to mitigate or not to mitigate. So who should test? Everyone should test. If you're a renter or an owner, it's probably not a bad idea. I want to clarify though that right now, laws are not in place to give renters rights to get a mitigation system. They have to work with their landlord if their radon level is high. Most laboratories sell short-term radon test kits. I mean, radon laboratories sell short-term test kits as well. We have a contract with AirCheck, so it's on our website. You can go to the website posted on the presentation 2, which is mn.radon.com. The other thing is we give out radon test kits each winter to county health departments, and then generally they give it to you for free or for like $2 to $5. And with that, you can get them there. A lot of health departments carry them. You can look on our website too and just find out if they carry them. There's a list of health departments. Lastly, there's hardware stores and you can buy them there. But with hardware stores, they usually have they have an upfront cost, but then they have a back cost for the lab analysis. And it costs a little bit more generally if you buy them from hardware stores. I also want to point out for long-term test kits, you can get them from like American Lung Association, Kansas State University, Amazon, as well as other places that might sell them, but I know those three. Now we're going to transition into radon mitigation systems. So this is if your radon levels are high and you decide to get a radon mitigation system installed. You would hire someone who is licensed. Now, this is different than certified. Certified is something that as a national organization, they might certify contractors, but we license them, which means they have to pass tests and go through training that the state provides. So you want to make sure if you do mitigation that you hire someone who is licensed, and you can look on our website again for people who are licensed. When they install the mitigation system, they'll do a couple of things. They'll put a radon fan in, and they'll put a PVC pipe in, and basically run the fan. So what happens is the air pressure before the pipe goes in is going into the home below the soil. It goes into the home. When you put the pipe in, you put the fan in, it changes the air pressure, and instead of it flowing into the home, the soil gas where the radon is, that soil gas now is entering through the PVC pipe, being sucked up through the fan, and then dispersed out. And so the radon levels generally go down quite a bit. No matter what they are, they'll be dispersed through the pipe. So it doesn't matter if you have 100 or you have 5. The radon levels at the end should be pretty low. Around 2 is generally what radon mitigators get it down to today, picocuries per liter. Other points to notice about the radon mitigation system. So with the radon mitigation system, they have something called a YouTube manometer. Basically, it monitors whether the fan is working. And they have to put it on every pipe in the basement. And so really what you'll see when they install the system is they have some things to tell you if the pipe is working, the fan is working. And my boss always says, U is boo and J is yay. So when you have a YouTube manometer, if it looks like a J, it means it's sucking air out of the system, the radon. If it's a U, that is not sucking, and there's a problem with the fan. There's also a monitor that alarms if the fan isn't working, called an active notification monitor. So it's important because we have high radon in our home and we want to make sure the system is working. So that's 2 measures to make sure the mitigation system works. All licensed mitigation providers need to also put on a system tag that identifies them and their phone number. So if there's any problems, you can call them. So this is sealing. Every radon mitigation professional seals the home before they do anything else because it makes the fan more efficient to suck out that air. If you have a lot of cracks, that fan has to work a lot more to get all that radon air out. This is a picture of a fan. Fans are installed in a space that is not conditioned. So it'd be an outside space like you see on the left picture, or it would be in an attic space like on the right picture. And this is because if there was concentrated radon and the fan would leak, you don't want it to go into the home. It's unlikely, but that's why we do it. This is a very, very boring picture of a electric junction box. And it's something that the installers have to put in, and sometimes they have to hire an electrician to install it. It should go next to the radon fan. This is what I talked about before. This is what a U2 manometer and an active notification system look like. And they look like this, and it's basically red dye liquid that is put into a tube and plugged into the pipe. And you can see that if the air moves through the pipe, it's going to pick up that dye and cause that J curve. If the air stops moving, it's going to not pick up that liquid, and it's going to go to a U curve. So it's important to recognize the top of the J curve. Like if it's, you can see in the picture maybe that the level is 2. So you mark where that level is 2, and if it goes down a little bit, it means that that fan isn't working as well. If it goes down to the number 1, it means the fan, there's something wrong with the fan. So it's good to mark when you get a mitigation system where that dye, upper part of the J curve of that dye is. The other one thing that people don't like, and I don't blame them, is where they put the pipe. You want to make sure the pipe isn't in a space that you need to use because they'll need to wind it up through the home. If you have a house like mine that has limited closet space and you don't want a pipe in it, then they put the pipe outside. So they could put the pipe inside or outside the home, and it would go up to the roof line like this. And in this instance, it's an outside mitigation system. It must go 10 feet above any openings like doors and windows, because you have concentrated radon going out that pipe. You don't want it to go back into windows or anything like that. You also want it to be above the closest eave, like it is here. So those are 2 things to watch out for when they install the radon mitigation system. So you might ask, is a contractor licensed? So when you hire someone, you can always ask for their card. And on that, they would have, if they're licensed or not, in the expiration date. And you could check our site as well. You could ask, you can check our site. And on that site, you can enter in a zip code. And then there'll be a list of contractors, and you can call a couple and get some estimates, probably for free, and then pick which one you want to hire. And I was going to say that there is like there's no conflict of interest in contractors can do both measurement and mitigation if they're licensed for both. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that if you do install a mitigation system and you have questions on it about maybe the quality of it, or you want to get it inspected, MDH could come out and inspect the mitigation system. So you could just go to our website and put in a contact sheet and say, I want this system inspected, and we'll go out and do that. In January of 2014, we basically had a radon disclosure law. and it's called the Radon Awareness Act. And in that act, you have to provide a radon disclosure packet, the real estate agent, to the buyer. The information included in that packet would be if you did a test, and then if you did what the level is, or many levels were if you did more than one test. And then if you install the mitigation system, you would disclose that too. So that would be information provided to the buyer. And really what we're trying to do is let the buyer know that radon is a problem and they can ask for it to be tested. And if in the end, the radon is tested and it's high, then the buyer and the seller could negotiate how they want to pay for the mitigation system. It's not required. It's not required to test. It's not required to mitigate. It's just something we recommend, and we hope with the disclosure that it would be more common. So the last thing I wanted to mention to everyone here is we have a lot of radon education materials on our website. You can go again to mn.gov/radon. And we have a number of brochures. We have radon short brochure, just a couple pages. It explains everything pretty much in a nutshell. We have it in English, Spanish, and Hmong. We also have it in Somali, but we don't have it up yet because we're looking for photographs of that talent, of Somali families, so we can include those pictures in the brochure. So if anybody has any ideas, I'd love to hear from you. The other thing is we have a larger radon booklet. It's like 35 pages or 36, more detailed. That unfortunately is just in English right now, but it provides more information on radon. And then we have a radon testing guide to show you how to install the mitigation, we have a radon testing guide to show you how to install, not install, I keep on saying install. Oh, I'm on my installing mitigation systems. We have to, for the radon testing guide, it's just to show you how to test. But there's also a video that shows you how to set up the test kit. So we have a radon video and we also have a guide. So with those two things, testing shouldn't be too hard, but if you do have questions on it, you can always call us or email us as well. And with that, I just want some important takeaways to talk about that. Now, radon is a common issue in Minnesota. We know that. It's the second leading cause of lung cancer, first for non-smokers. And testing could be done by the owner, the renter, or a professional. If you're not an owner and you're not a renter, then you can't test that place unless you're a licensed professional. The EPA action level is 4, but it's never that black and white. And then MDH, we have a list of qualified professionals on our website for measurement and for mitigation. So I want to thank, again, the 10,000 Family Study. And this is my contact information. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to just email me. You have it. And if I don't answer anything right by the time we're done today or didn't have time, you're welcome to email me or call me or whatever you'd like to do. But thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I'll stop presenting now.
Great. Thank you, Mark. That was really informative, and we've got some good questions in the Q&A. If you're still in attendance and would like to ask questions, please do type them in the Q&A box. And I just remind people too that participants in the 10,000 Family Study will receive a radon test. So that's one element of participating. So that's also possible. You can go to our website to sign up and then eventually get your kit. So the first question is from Stephanie. And she asks, are there certain types of soil that are more resistant to radon?
Sorry. No, it's not that soils are more resistant or less resistant to radon, though. I think sandstone has more uranium content than other types of soils per se, or rock. And so if you live atop of sandstone, you might have a more likely chance of having high radon. But there are really the main factor is if you have high radon levels, how do you mitigate it? Because they put basically they dig a hole in the ground And how that hole is dug depends on if it's clay or
Hmm.
sand or other types of soil. And depending on that, they'll know what type of fan to put in and how to dig that hole to create that mitigation system and basically suck the best way through the fan to get that radon out. So what really is the most important thing is what mitigation system to install and how to install it to get that mitigation, the radon lower. But soils, well, most soils are going to have high radon content, but it depends on how the house brings the radon into the home.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Stephanie, for the question. Here's the next question's from Carol, and she asks, is radon involved with other types of cancer besides lung cancer? You want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So lung cancer, I mean, this is the known, okay? And that's why the recommendations are to mitigate if you have high levels, because that's a known risk. What's an outstanding question, and the reason that the National Cancer Institute was giving the 10,000 families group funding to study this, is it looks like it could be a risk factor for hematologic cancers like leukemias and lymphomas, but that is not known yet. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to study here in Minnesota. And those are kind of the lung cancer for sure, hematologic cancer, maybe. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Mark?
No, I would just say it's up in the air. Like, we know that it's a known cancer. So that's why we're recommending it. Like, we can't recommend anything else right now because we don't know. And
Yeah.
until we know, it's just the way it is.
Exactly. So thank you, Carol, for the question. Our next one is a question about, and you partially answered this, Mark. It's about an older mitigation system. So this person has a system from the 90s and they're wondering if they should get it inspected because they're concerned it's not working anymore. And so how would that work? Would someone come to their house and inspect it, or can they just do like a new radon test? What's the recommendation?
Yeah, so I am looking right now. We only started doing, here it is, June 1st, 2020 is when, if the system was installed on June 1st, 2020 or more, we will go out and do an inspection. Unfortunately, there's so many radon mitigation systems that probably need inspections that are old. We don't have the people to do it. We don't have the staff power. If it is that old, the recommendation is to test. Every time you have a mitigation system, you should test every 2 years. And it sounds like that hasn't been tested in a while. So in order to see if it's working, look at the manometer to see what that reading is and test. Even if the manometer was working, it doesn't mean that the radon levels are where they should be. It just means the fan's working.
Mhm.
So go ahead and do that test and see what it's like. They only last, I think, anywhere from 20 to 30 years. So it might be time that you have to install a new one, or maybe just get a new fan, which would be cheaper, which might only be around $500. And so do the test and test every couple of years to make sure it's still working. And then if not, hire a licensed professional to come in and take a look at it. Or you could even do that now if you like. And most likely you may need a new fan, but that's it.
All right, thank you for that good question. Next, we have a question about, the type of home. So this person says, I've heard that radon is only a problem in more modern homes because of energy efficiency and the airtight building materials. Is that true?
No, unfortunately, any home could have high radon.
Mhm.
But to that point, let me just say that my home is over 100 years old. But before we bought the house, someone re-insulated the house, and it is over-insulated. And so, we do have high radon, but our house is old. It was, yes, insulated well. But, if you didn't look at the history, you wouldn't have known that. But secondly, even if your home isn't well insulated, your home could still suck radon in. There's so many different variables. Insulation is, yes, one of many variables, not the only one that determines if your home has high radon. So it could be any home.
Great, thank you. All right, here's a question from Dean. What is your opinion of the Airthings Corentium? I don't even know if I said that right. Radon detector. Are you familiar with it? And what do you think?
So that's a really good question. There are a lot of radon radon testing devices, digital devices now out there. And Kansas State University has done a lot of experimentation to see which ones are working, which ones are not working. And so I can give you, you know, I can talk about what those results showed, but I can't really share them too much because it's like they don't want you to. But so the results showed that you know, I think they all work fine enough in the beginning. Some worse than others, but really the question is about calibration, and we haven't tested that yet. After a while, after you buy it and you've had it for a little bit, do those readings, do they still stay reliable and accurate? And that's the big question. And right now, the radon certification, like national organization, ARST, does not recommend these, only because they can't be calibrated right now. And also because mostly because they can't be calibrated. We don't really know what they are for long-term usage. We don't recommend them. They're not like certified to be used. So you can use them as like a general screening of your house, but then always follow up with like a short-term test, like an air check or another short-term test that is certified.
So can I, just as somebody who's less familiar, this is a great topic. So is that something that's just a continual monitor in your house with like an app, and you are always knowing what your radon levels are, or is that what the product is?
Yeah, they have a bunch
Okay.
of them, like EcoSense. There's so many. They've come out with many of them. There's about more than 10, I think now, varieties of them. And they just are an app on your phone, and they tell you what the just continual readings of radon. So they're good as a screening tool, but I wouldn't use it to pay for, you know, an expensive mitigation system. I definitely something else, but that's what they are.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I get it. It's a good idea, but I hear what you're saying, which is you can't know over time how well it's working. And so the, you know, plan of doing the short-term tests and repeating it every few years is probably better at this point, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, the data is just not out there yet. They did some tests and they showed that they're all, most of them, but that's the thing too. Some of them were like pretty accurate and reliable. And they did the tests, and other ones were not. And I'm not sure which ones now were more accurate or reliable than others. But they didn't do it over the long term. They just did like a one and done thing. So yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now we have a question about mitigation. And so this person asks, does a mitigation system drop levels to 2 or near 0?
It would never be near 0 because it would go to background level, which is like 0.5 or so. But you're probably not going to get it that low. You could get it 1, you could get it 2, you could get it 3. It depends on a lot of factors, and they might have to come back again. Radon mitigation professional installers might have a guarantee of getting it below 4, getting it below 2, so you'd have to work with them on that. They always get it, they have to get it below 4 because that's the action level. But they would come back again until they get it to a certain level. But it depends. Most of them though will get it 2 or below.
Okay. I know, I think, you know, one of my follow-up questions as you were talking about it, so at the beginning of your talk, you know, it was the stack effect and how air moves into our homes. When you put the tube in, you know, the radon mitigation, you're still going to have air that needs to move into the home. So I can see how it's hard to get it to 0 because you're still going to have some air that's coming in. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so what they try to do, it's so my coworker probably explained this better because he did mitigation stuff. But what you do is you have a pit that you put the pipe, and then in the 4 corners of the basement, you're going to drill holes, and then you're going to basically check the pressurization. And it should be, I forget what they use, but it should be in the negative, like -5, -8. You're going to turn on the fan. Sorry, I'm not explaining this right. You're going to have a pipe in the middle, and you're going to have holes that are poked on the 4 corners of the basement. You're trying to see that you get like negative pressure. So you're going to turn on a fan that replicates, turn on a vacuum that's connected to the main pipe that replicates the suction of a fan.
Okay.
And then on those holes, you're going to measure to see that you have negative pressurization, like -5, -8. It means that with that type of fan and that pipe, it's going to suck all corners of the basement. So it's going to suck everything through that pipe.
Okay.
The more the negative pressure, basically, like the better to an extent. It's called pascals of pressure. and you want negative pascals. It just means that, like, so you try to determine what the fan should be. You don't want a small fan if you have a home that's like 2,000 square foot basement, because it's
Yeah.
not enough. It's not going to suck from those corners of the basement.
Right.
The more you suck from those corners of the basement, the more it reaches those corners with that pipe, the better it's going to suck all that radon in. But some radon is going to go into the home no matter what.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Here's a question from Becky. Are radon detectors that say that you can buy from Amazon, like the Airthings Continuum, reliable? And I think it sounds like they're, these sort of newfangled monitors are reliable, but not, it's uncertain in the long term how long they would be reliable. Should you worry about like kits that you buy in like Home Depot? Are those equivalent to the ones you guys would provide?
A lot of the ones at Home Depot use liquid scintillation, which is a
Okay.
different process, but it's also reliable. It's the money. So what they do, and I'm not trying to shame Home Depot or anything, but a lot of the ones that are sold there have a cost of like, $15, which sounds inexpensive or whatever. But then they'll say, all right, we have the result. You have to pay another $10 for the analysis and to get the information.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do it that way. With like AirCheck, we have a contract with them. So they're all the same. They do the same thing. They do different processes, but the reliability and accuracy are the same. It's just how much do you want to pay for it?
Yeah, great. And thank you for the question. And if a question wasn't answered to your satisfaction, just put it right back in the Q&A. So I have a question about, kind of these differing recommendations from WHO and EPA. And do you think is there going to be consensus about where levels should be, or we're just going to have this ambiguity?
I think federal government, basically federal government moves at a glacial pace. So there's always going to be some ambiguity to get different government entities, especially from different nations, to create something that is the same. And so when I looked at EPA and why they weren't the same, EPA is like, well, we already kind of do it. We say 2 to 4 consider mitigation. It's kind of wishy-washy, where at least 2 messaging isn't wishy-washy, 2.7 or higher mitigate. EPA is 2 to 4, 2 to 3.9 consider mitigate, 4 or higher mitigate. It's a little bit more wishy-washy, but I think that's just where it's going to stay.
Okay. Yeah. Great. I see a comment in here about having the interpreters, and we were very happy to provide them. And I hope it was helpful to those of you who are hard of hearing. So next, a question. We have a short-term radon air test from a county service building with a use-by date of November 2022. Can we still use it, or do we have to get a new one? Or should we just have a mitigation pro come out and run their own test?
Number one, no, you shouldn't use it. It's expired, and it won't give you an accurate test.
Okay.
Number 2 is don't hire a mitigator to do a measurement because they're very expensive. It would be like $200. So
Okay.
instead, spend $13, go to mn.radon.com, buy that test, and see what it is, and then you can figure out if you want to hire that mitigation provider or not, or test twice. But if you were to hire a mitigator, it'd be $200.
Great. We have another question, and I like this one because it gets at, how urgent is the risk? So if you get a high rating, reading of radon, how soon do you need to get the mitigation? I mean, sooner, this person acknowledges sooner is better than later, but if you wait a year or two, like, is that okay? And just even thinking about risk, so go ahead and answer that question, and I have a follow-up. So how long is kind of an acceptable wait time?
Yeah, it's hard. We equate risk of radon with risk of smoking. And it's like some people genetically could smoke a couple cigarettes and get lung cancer. Other people could smoke all their life and not get lung cancer. It's kind of the similar thing with radon. I mean,
Yeah.
to be honest, like my radon level is 3.6, and I was going to get a mitigation system. I tested it 4 months ago. So I plan to do it in the next couple of like months, but I haven't done it yet. And I,
Mhm.
it's like, it is what it is. You could decide on your own risk. For me, I am okay right now saying, oh, it's 3.6, I'm in the basement, but I'm gonna do it in the next like half a year.
Yeah.
And, I'm okay with that risk. If it was like 9.0, I'd be like, Schneekes, I gotta get it right away. Interpreter try to interpret Schneekes, I don't know.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it's kind of, it just depends on that. But yeah, it's your own level of risk and your own level of what you feel like comfortable with, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then I think, it's who's using the high space, right? So if you can't do it right away, you could do things like not have bedrooms in the basement until you get fixed. I think things like that could probably help you in the interim. Okay, we got some more questions and I want to make sure we get to them. So Dean asks, would you say test results would be more accurate if a test is done while on vacation over a week? Or, some other time when windows and doors wouldn't be getting opened and closed?
So we didn't actually talk about this, so it's a good point. When we test for a short-term test, it should be closed house conditions, which means like generally keep the windows closed and go out normally and enter and exit the door normally, but don't do excessively. Like don't just like open the door up, and let for the dog going to the bathroom and then coming back in or whatever. You want to make sure that you close it up most of the time, which means that it's a good time to do it during the winter when it's the heating season
Mhm.
or when it's the summer with air conditioning on. If it's the spring and you have the windows open, it's probably not a great time. So you're welcome when you go on vacation to do it if you think that would be the best for closed house conditions. But you don't have to go on vacation to do that.
Great, thank you for that. Next one is about cost, which I think is a difficult and important question. So what is the range of costs for installation of mitigation? So you mentioned that just even a fan replacement could cost up to $500. So, what is the cost and what resources are available to help?
Great question.
Yeah.
With COVID and then with the wars that are going on and whatever other economic factors have made the costs substantially more, we used to say that radon mitigation systems before COVID cost an average of 1,500. Now we're saying they cost around at the low end 1,800 to about 3,000. So mitigation systems are a bit more pricey now. And fans too, 500 is probably on the low end, but with COVID and stuff, they probably are more with that. Prices have just gone up, unfortunately, as you know, when we go out grocery shopping.
Mhm.
In terms of what is available, you could look at some financial, some grants that are available in home repair loans, and they're on our website, but they are very specific to who qualifies for them. And so right now it's not a lot available, but you can take a look. We are trying to work to see where we can get funding to mitigate, to help people mitigate their homes. The EPA, who gives us our grant funding, does not allow us to spend money to help mitigate homes.
Mhm.
Well, right now we can't do a whole lot with it, but we're trying to see if there are other funding sources in the future.
Yeah, that's sort of on my own agenda is to try to, do some work at the state legislature to help get some funds available for Minnesotans, because this is something that doesn't care your economic status, where you live. It's something that affects, Minnesotans generally, and it would be great to have some resources to help defer those costs. So I know we're coming up at the end of the hour. We're going to stay on and keep answering questions. Here's one from Dean. Have you seen where the level is the same in the basement and on the upper floors of a house? I think this person's concerned that their gauge may not be accurate. So how much does it flux across a house?
Yeah, I mean, radon, we say it's generally highest and the lowest level, but that doesn't generally, really, I think we've done a study, and don't quote me on this, but we did a study, and I think around, or no, it was Illinois that did the study.
Mhm.
And it was somewhere around, this was, I think was apartment buildings, 20 to 30% of apartments on like the higher levels had the same reading as the lower level. So
Hmm.
it definitely could happen.
Mhm.
It's not as common, but for sure. And then you think of like, if we have a fan, a whole house fan, well, what's happening? The air from the basement is being, it's going to everywhere in the home. And with that is the radon too. So although we say to test in the lowest livable area, it doesn't always mean the lowest livable area has the lowest amount of radon. And it also doesn't, also could mean really that the radon levels could be kind of similar between the first, second floor and the basement because of the air conditioning and heating systems.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, great. Okay, well, I think we are exactly at the end of our time and we seem to be out of questions as well. So Mark, thank you for your time. Artis and Janine, thank you as well for your interpretation skills. And we invite you to visit our website for the 10,000 Families or any of our social media channels. We'll be posting today's presentation on those channels and would be glad to have you share it with your friends and family. So thank you very much.